a full committee meeting, planning committee meeting of the whole, September 23rd, 2020. Good evening. I'm going to have Vin Massiana run through the roll call for quorum.
Okay. Planning committee members, Andrew Martelli,
Here.
Tim White,
Here.
Catherine Hallen, and then board members, Mr. Perugini. I see he's here.
Here. Sorry.
Ms. Harrigan,
Here.
Ms. Ham,
Here.
and Mr. Grifo.
Here.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum.
Great. All right, Vin, could you put the flag up for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I can. Uh-oh, that's not really the one I want, but
It's all right, we get it.
okay, can we see that?
Yep. All right.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the
To
flag
the flag
of
of
the
the United
United States of America
and
to the republic
for which
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and
and
justice
for all.
for all.
Okay.
Okay, first item on the agenda is audience. Mr. Solon or Vin, are there any emails received?
I do not have any, but then again, I don't have access to that email request, and it, Mr. Solon looks like he's on, so if he can speak, we can hear him. And he may be just getting on. No, he may have trouble. He may be having trouble getting in. I see he's left the meeting.
Okay, so we could go back to that item.
I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, no, there are no correspondence.
No correspondence. Okay, great.
So point of information. Sorry, just Jeff, if you could just sort that out for future committee meetings, just for ones you don't attend.
Sure.
Just something to keep in mind. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, moving forward, I'd be happy if you wanted to forward any email correspondence to me, and we can go through them that way.
Yeah, we just didn't have any relevant correspondence to this meeting. I have
Okay.
worked it out, but I'm at the
Okay.
meeting, so I didn't send it to Ben.
Gotcha. Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we're going to move into item number 3, which is the Humiston building discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Vin. Vin sent out some items to the committee. I'm going to have him share the screen and walk us through the Humiston discussion about the facility.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martelli, and good evening, everyone. So hopefully you could see the template that I have on the screen. And if, Andrew, can you just confirm you see that so I can move through?
Yes, I have it. Yep.
So this is a template, and it is a draft template, so the committee members can, add to it as we go through the discussion. But I did put this together as a way to look at and gain an understanding of Humiston, the Humiston building in general. When I speak about it in tonight's presentation, covers the entire building, and the building includes Humiston School, which is our alternative high school, as well as the central office space that is occupied by all the departments of central office, including the superintendent's office. So this template, just starting at the top left, what I listed are the parameters, and these are really items to consider. These are the major ones that I've identified. There may be more. So when we look at Humiston building and compare it to any other alternative, whether it's lease space, whether it would be a new building, the things that we would want to consider are, one, the annual operating costs. And I'm going to go through these in some more detail, but I'll just run down the list. What are the capital investment costs for Humiston versus, for example, if we were to rent new space, would there be leasehold improvements that we would have to make to new space to make it adapted for either the Humiston School or central office or both? ADA compliance is certainly an important factor, and especially as it relates to the Humiston building, which is not ADA compliant for the most part currently. The other thing we need to consider is this Humiston building, if we vacate it, the costs don't go down to zero because you still have to, maintain the building, even though it's to some minimum extent. For example, in the winter, you'd want to keep the heat running at a low temperature just to make sure you don't freeze out the pipes. The next item is the cost and time required to remove the use restriction on this building if the plan were to repurpose the building or demolish the building or sell the building. When the building was donated in 1911, the way it was donated is that Julia Humiston put up $30,000. And then as part of the agreement, the building was then turned over to the town once it was built. And thereafter, it had to be used for public school purposes. So there's, certainly something that would need to be addressed. And then Humiston building is in and of itself part of the greater, I guess the center of town of Cheshire is on the National Register of Historic Places. So the Humiston building is listed, as part of this center of town that's on that register. Certainly, we'd want to look at the quality and functionality of this space versus any new space. Two important things that we'd want to consider. One, Humiston building is in close proximity to the high school, and there are students that do move between the two school buildings, as well as staff that move between the two school buildings. So being 0.9 miles from the high school is certainly a key factor and an advantage to the Humiston building right now. And then a kind of a subset of that is this next item, the student costs related to Humiston School, or the transportation costs related when we move students back and forth. The other factor is central office, being in the center of town, is in a really good and convenient spot, so that quick access to other schools becomes easier from the Humiston building. And there are situations, that aren't necessarily large emergencies, but, times that, the superintendent or Marlene Solana, our assistant superintendent, or myself do need to move into other buildings quickly. So that is another factor. And then the last item that I put in this template are, and I guess the best way to describe it is Humiston School roughly occupies about 7,500 square feet. Central office is about 7,500 square feet. Relatively small spaces that as part of an overall school modernization plan, if we decided that we, within another building project, can fit the alternative high school, 7,500 square feet is a lot easier to find space within a larger building project. And so Humiston School and Central Office are really our two smallest spaces. So really, making any moves before the entire school modernization committee's plan recommendation is made, may not be, the most efficient use of any money that's invested. So that's the basic template that I wanted to take you through. And before I pause for questions, I'm going to hit this first line item, because I know this has been kind of a big question within School Modernization Committee, and that is, what are the annual operating costs of the Humiston building? And so I just changed to a spreadsheet that was developed by Rich and I, and you could see the columns that we have listed here are 18, 19. These are the actual costs of running Humiston and Central Office. 18, 19, and 19, 20 in the next column. So you could see here, we heat with natural gas, and that's been about 22,000. Let's call it an average of $20,000 per year the last 2 years. Electricity is probably an average of about 15,000 if you look at the 2 years. Sewer costs, $500. You could see water, trash, plowing, each several $1,000s per year. And then fire sprinkler testing, emergency lighting testing, fire extinguisher inspection, and integrated pest management is what IPM stands for, insect control, $500. So if you look at the recurring expenses of this Humiston building, you'll see that we average somewhere around $47,500, $48,000, let's call it. And then if we take this one step further and look at, maintenance and repairs that are non-recurring, you'll see that, I'll just cut to the bottom line first. 1819 non-recurring expenses were about 40,000, and 1920 it was about 35,000. The big difference between these 2 years, because you could see there's some minor expenses for painting and we did some boiler repairs, but in the last fiscal year, 1920, we had to do some work on the second and third floor bathrooms because we had a plumbing leak. So you could see those items total a little over $10,000. And then here in 1819, we replaced some of the, not the main entrance door, but the other entrance doors around the building that were aged out. So the bottom line is that over the last 2 years, the cost of, heating, providing electricity, and maintaining the Humiston building has been about $85,000. So this is in line with the information that was provided to the School Modernization Committee, earlier this year, which was more on an estimated, per square foot basis. But now these are your true costs on a non-allocated basis. So I'm going to pause there before we start really discussion on the template. And I stopped sharing the screen. So are there any questions so far, as far as what we presented for the template or the cost?
Finn, if I could just ask quick, I know you provided a snapshot for 18, 19, and 1920 for the non-reoccurring expenses. Since you've been around for some time, is that about $30,000 to $40,000 a year? Is that normal to be spending in non-reoccurring expenses on the building just to keep it open, so to speak, without the large capital expenditures that are in the capital budget?
It is, I guess it's fair to say that we've looked at this building as being on hold, for potential future, relocation. But we are maintaining the building to the extent we can. So I think this 40,000 a year roughly is about what is normal for us. We've identified in the next section the large capital investments we need to make. And really, the only other thing that I can think of that I would consider a maintenance expense that we know we have to undertake is the men's bathroom in the lower level of this building, which is probably, Rich, I know you had done, some initial estimates. We're talking
Yeah,
40,000 or so?
including abatement, new fixtures and reconfiguring, it's probably around in the $30,000 neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, that's a good example of a project that we know is out there. We should do it, but, we won't do it unless we have other priorities met. And that's the juggle that we always do, not only within this building, but across the building.
Okay.
So that bathroom doesn't get a lot of use. Greg Gibbons and I probably use it more than anybody else. And so we haven't made it a priority for us.
Got it. And then one other thing before I get to everybody else's questions here, if I could, has there ever been like a market study done for this building by the town that you're aware of, i.e. selling it by the town or the school district?
No, not that I'm aware of, Andrew. And I mean, I've been here for, 10 and a half years. So there's nothing been done during that period of time, certainly.
Great. All right. Thank you. Adam.
Thank you. Vin, during your presentation, you spoke about the central location of the building in reference to both administration and students. Could you perhaps elaborate on the student portion as to what type of students travel between the high school and Humiston? And is that something that could be, is that a problem that could be solved by, I don't know, having a different spot inside the high school if Humiston were to move?
Well, I'm going to give Dr. Solon an opportunity to answer that before I do, because he's more well-versed in that.
Sure. Sorry, guys. I was driving. I left work too late. But anyway, basically, the students that we have at Humiston are students for whom the high school just wasn't working out, that it wasn't appropriate. In many cases, sheer size and volume of students, that there are anxiety levels at the high school that are for their attendance. That being said, the goal is that they transition back to the high school or fully to the high school as much as we can. We want them to be participants at Cheshire High School. So the goal is, that we address the needs that they have to a point that they could return full time. And in that process, we try and split time between the two buildings. So, a number of students are, traveling to the high school for classes. The schedule doesn't always make that easy, but we're trying to get them back to the building as much as we can. So I don't know if that answers your question fully, Adam, but that's, kind of where we're at.
So if the location were to move, it's just a matter of an increased transportation cost, or I don't know, do many students at Humiston have their own vehicles? Are they allowed to have vehicles or on premises or anything like that?
They may, but most do not. And we don't, in terms of cost, it's not wildly more expensive. If they were, say, if we had an alternative school, at one point we talked about having, central office in the Alexion building. If we had, let's say, moved Humiston up there, it would be more of a time issue than it would be a money issue per se.
Right.
But yeah, money would be impacted. The closer that we can be to Cheshire High, it's advantageous, but I wouldn't call it a deal breaker.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You all set, Adam?
Yes.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, with regard to the 7,500 square feet for each section, let's say you did get a new facility, would you want it to be that size, bigger, smaller? Any idea?
I think that for central office anyway, if we had more efficient space, we could
Mhm.
probably go a little bit smaller, and that's assuming that we keep the same central office staff configuration. Some of these departments can be split out. It's, I think the space, having all of us together, even though the space isn't that great, because it's very choppy, but it works for us. So if we could keep central office staff together, we might be able, if we have more efficient space, to slightly shrink the footprint. But I don't think it will be dramatically different. The school side, part of what's included in the 7,500 square feet is the gym space that, in theory, we really don't need. If we had the alternative high school in a location that already had and could share some of that type of common space. But I don't think it would be dramatically different as I sit here, Tim.
Okay.
But as I said, what happens in a larger building project, if we were able to try and condense central office into a larger building project, or the alternative high school, or both, it just becomes a lot more reasonable, to look at it from that perspective than just try and take 15,000 square feet and find a new home for that. It's probably not the best use of our resources overall.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing that goes through my mind is it's not just the square footage, it's the cubic footage you have there. You probably have normal height ceilings from a heating perspective. The ADA compliance, I know you haven't gotten to that, so I could wait on this. If you were only using the first floor of the building, would you have ADA compliance issues? Very generally, would you?
In this building,
Yeah.
yeah, we still would.
Okay.
Because, I mean, just getting into the Humiston School Building, you're either going down steps or up steps.
Okay.
So, yeah, it wouldn't solve that problem.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions for Vin?
Not for right now. I do have some more questions, but I could hold off on them.
So
Yep. Welcome, Catherine.
Sorry I was late. Thanks. I'm here now.
So, what I would say on annual operating costs, just as a general statement, at $85,000 per year, including, maintenance and our recurring costs, because we own the building and we pay no rent, we're not going to find, if we were to rent other space, it's going to be dramatically more expensive because, at a minimum, even if we could replace 15,000 square feet of space at $8 a square foot, and I'm just, kind of making that number up as a generalization, you're talking about $120,000 per year just for your rent before you're paying utilities and other costs. So from an operating cost basis, we wouldn't be doing any better. There are other factors. I mean, quality of space, you could argue, we would do much better, and that's part of what you're paying for. But you're not going to, move out of this building, rent somewhere else at a lower cost. It's just not practical. I happened to read an article yesterday that Wallingford's central office, which isn't a freestanding building, they're talking about renewing their space. And they've got a little under 13,000 square feet of space. And the cost for rent is somewhere around $140,000, I believe is what the article said, that they're negotiating. So they're at $12 a square foot. It's pretty basic space. It's nice. But it's just office space. So from an operating cost basis, because we own the building, I think from a cost point of view, we're not going to do better than what we have here. Okay, so any questions on that before I move to capital? Okay. So with,
Ben, I'm sorry, I had just one clarification. That's 120,000? Is that annually or per month?
no, that's annually.
Annually, okay.
Yeah, so we're at 85,000. And what I'm saying is that even if we could get a base rent, for 15,000 square feet at 120,000 a year, it's 120,000 plus whatever additional operating costs, and I'm assuming the $8 is a triple net lease. So, as a tenant, we'd be responsible for everything, above the base rent. So that would include heating and electricity and those types of things.
Vin, real quick, who does the plowing there?
Rich,
Yeah, we have a contractor that does the main plowing, and then my staff takes care of sidewalks and general cleanup.
So there's an outside contractor hired for the parking lots in general?
They're hired based on district, so it's really not based on square footage per se.
Okay.
we have a couple of our pickups outfitted with plows and salting equipment. So, if it's a small event, we could do it internally. We do.
Yeah, our current contract is based on time and material for better clarification.
I think there was a question from Faith.
Yeah, so I know there are a lot of unknowns, but Andrew raised an interesting question about whether or not there's been a market study. And I guess that is a question that I have as well. And in order to get a complete picture of what the situation is going forward, and I'm not saying in the next couple of weeks, but it would be interesting to hear if there is, if, you know, that's a prime piece of property in town. Would, could we benefit by considering a sale? And and I don't mean immediately, but as the modernization committee comes up with its plan, that becomes a piece of the puzzle as well.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I did include in the packet, which I don't think I need to bring up on the screen. I'll just explain the 5-year capital plan. What's included in our 5-year plan right now is $3.45 million, and that's really to do 3 things. One, make the building ADA compliant, which essentially means we'd have to add 2 elevators, one on each side of the building. The second item that's included in that 3.5 million is replacement of the roof. This is a slate roof, and again, it's a historic building, so we have a $900,000 estimate to do that. It's not in need of immediate replacement, but you know, in a 5-year plan, we've included it. And also to replace the windows. Some of the windows, or I should say most of the windows, have been replaced in this building, but they've failed. You know, seals are broken. Some windows, you know, won't open. Some windows, when you open them, you got to be careful that you don't get hurt because they just don't stay up. So, you know, when this work was done, and it was, you know, it's probably over 20 years ago, you know, the windows that were replaced need to be replaced again. So we know we've got $3.5 million worth of capital investment required for this building just to do those 3 things. And then the second piece of information that I will share is when Perkins Eastman completed their study, their review of this building, they had an estimated total cost of about $5 million to, you know, not only bring this building up to code, but also to make the necessary improvements to really make the building, you know, look better, including the facade, you know, and make it more functional overall. So, the one disadvantage to, you know, this building is that we know that there is a capital cost investment. It is a, you know, building that's over 100 years old. It's a historic building. You know, the investment could be made, but that's obviously a big decision, you know, within the scope of, you know, an overall plan in my view. And the ADA compliance, you know, is certainly, you know, going to be an important component of bringing this building, you know, from a modernization point of view, where it needs to be. So that's the capital investment question. And then again, if we're looking at new space, if it's a lease space versus, you know, moving, you know, either one of these facilities into part of a larger building renovation, then any new space that we get might have some leasehold improvement costs that, you know, depending on what it is, if it's not a new building, you know, to try and accommodate, for example, Humiston Alternative School into any space, it could be anywhere from, you know, $1 million or up if we're trying to do that. And again, that's obviously something that would have to be negotiated. It's pie in the sky information. It's not just capital costs of Humiston. If we're looking to rent space, you have to remember there's probably going to be some leasehold costs if we were to get new space.
Got it. I think Adam has a question, then Ann.
Thank you. This is sort of a multi-part sort of thinking out loud / question sort of thing. So you did a line item 3.5 million in capital improvement costs to Humiston, and then you also said 120,000 a month potentially for just to rent the space. So so I, just ran a little quick math. That's basically a 30-year loan for $3.5 million. Adjusting for interest or whatever we could get. Isn't there property out there that we could purchase that would probably be less than 3.5 million, that would have more square footage and be ADA compliant? Potentially. I mean, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And then to piggyback on that, I toured Darcy School today to see what they were doing as far as their coronavirus protections of the kids and everything like that. And I've been there 3 times, and this is the first time where it really uh, made an impact on me about the uniqueness of the property, where there's the trails in back that the kids are using as the outdoor activity, especially now during COVID. It's And I think the modernization committee should really think about, if Darcy is going to be closed down, if that's going to be part of the plan, how is the uniqueness of what Darcy does going to be combined into the other spaces? And could some of what Darcy does also be combined into a new administrative space? Because I think that there needs to be some creative thinking there, because of the uniqueness of what they do and the uniqueness of the programs there. That I think that a modernization really take a look at all of that, and I think strongly that we should look at purchasing property for Humiston and administration, and perhaps even combining those things, unless combining the Darcy components, unless there's going to be additions to other schools somewhere. So I think there really needs to be a lot of creative thinking. So there wasn't a lot of, I guess, it was more commentary than question, but I do think that purchasing might be better off in the long run. Vin, I don't know if probably it's easier to commandeer rent expense than it is to go out to get bonding for purchasing property of that kind. But I don't know. I think maybe in the long run it might be better if we own property instead of lease it. If that way we're not at the whims of a landlord for what we want to do.
Well, as you said, that I'll take all of that as commentary, and I'm not answering any part of that question. And I think you hit the nail on the head, that it's kind of exactly what a school modernization committee, has been formed to really take an overall plan view for what we need to do in all our buildings, because there are, a lot of different components and probably a lot of different options that we could come up with.
And I think, Adam, just your commentary there, I think it makes a lot of sense as to why we're doing this and why it might make sense to kind of hold off on any quick reaction to space planning until we have a full picture from the consultant and really have a chance to look at all options on the table.
Absolutely.
So, Anne.
Yeah, a quick question, Vin. When Perkins Eastman did the looked at revamping the whole building, is there any possibility of using the front door to that building? This is just curiosity on my part. Is the front door?
Well, that's a great question.
I've never gone into the front door of that building, and I'm wondering if one can.
Yeah. We don't use the front door just because it is more convenient to reach the rest of the space through those 2 side doors. And those 2 side doors, were configured with the electronic door strike. It was probably an easier configuration. But I have used that front door. It does open, it does close. But it's not a commonly used door. But in a reconfiguration, that's an interesting point. Why not use that as visitor access? It's just a little further than from the parking lot, I suppose.
You may have seen that front door in the famous Convocation Back to the Future video of 2019. However, it is Vin said, it's not very convenient to parking, so we tend not to use that one.
Thank you, Vin. I was just thinking in terms of if we were to use that building, it's a beautiful historic building. And if the town, if somebody who has the power decides that we should renovate it. It should have a working front door,
Yeah.
I guess. But so I was just wondering if there actually was one that worked. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Adam, are you set?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, Tim.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll try to keep down my counterpart here, the noise.
Are those comic books he's showing you?
It's a Halloween. I think it's a toy store, maybe Lakeshore, a Halloween book. So there's lots of good pictures to look at and stuff to buy. I think this question is probably for Rich. So I heard two numbers get mentioned before: $3.5 million and $5 million, sort of as a range for capital improvements.
Do you like this?
It's good. That's good for Halloween. Deb, please stop. So I just divided that by 15,000 square feet, just in terms of a building. Commercial construction, that comes out to about $230 to $300 per square foot. What would commercial construction be in Cheshire as a ballpark figure?
Yeah, I mean, the commercial construction based on square footage, a lot of it is dependent on use. So obviously, like for instance, like a doctor's office, would be in the 350 to as much as 425 a foot. If it's just a general office space, 200, 250. It all depends. I mean, I remember the days when renovation was $65 a foot. Those days have long gone. So, I mean, a lot of it is dependent. Also, to take into consideration is the age of the building, the shell of the building, abatement requirements that would have to be, looked into and dealt with. A lot of times abatement falls off the radar, and that ends up being 20% of the renovation costs. So it's an older building. My guess is that the dollar per square foot cost for renovation would be elevated because of that.
I'm actually not even talking about renovation. I'm talking about new construction is what I should have said.
Out of the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing comparative talking, yeah, it's probably would be more cost efficient to build out of the ground.
Okay. Okay. So is it all right? So it would be in the range of like $200, $250.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking very generally per square foot.
That would be like very baseline.
Okay, so it would go up from there. And what about could you off the top of your head say anything about school construction? So the Humiston school, that's good, Deb. The Humiston school component per square foot, what might that be?
Yeah, it's driven by what the curriculum requirements are. So I mean, I don't know if maybe Jeff can speak to it, but like, would you consider, lab space? Would you consider, gymnasiums?
Oh yeah.
All of those different spaces have different costs per square foot. So I mean, it's kind of hard to make a general estimate on, what that cost would be.
So let me just ask you, Vin, really quick. Do we have any lab space in Humiston right now? Because that's the expensive one. That's like $1,000 a square foot or more, $2,000 a square foot. I forget. Do we have any? Okay.
We don't have lab space. I mean, basically, Humiston is configured as classroom space, and some office space for a social worker, for example.
Okay.
That doesn't mean if you looked at a new configuration or new space for Humiston, you would necessarily exclude that as part of your educational specs.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah.
But yeah, there's nothing like that now.
But in apples to apples, it sounds to me like we probably have certain mandatory costs over the next few years, and new construction, taking the land part out of it, the new construction may actually cost competitive down, Devin, compared to what we're talking about right now. Okay. And the second thing, the second question I have relates to Darcy. So Adam, you had mentioned a second ago about new construction that would incorporate Darcy. Darcy is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Darcy is a certain amount of it, I'll just say half of it, I don't know what, is pre-K. And the operating costs are, as I understand it, fully funded by the state.
Only for the Birth to 3 program.
Oh, the birth to 3. Okay, so
Right.
so would the birth just say would the birth to 3 be would capital costs related to that be fully funded by the state, 100%?
Um,
Or you're not sure?
I
And
don't, yeah, I don't think so. And, the one thing,
Okay.
birth to 3, doesn't occupy a lot of space because birth to 3 is primarily a program that's conducted in,
Oh, in the homes.
in people's homes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the space that we have, for birth to 3, would be some evaluation space and space for the staff that, run the birth to 3 program. So
Okay.
really the hard cost when I say the hard cost, I mean the cost you'd need to invest if you were replacing Darcy would be for your pre-K classrooms. We do have 2 Smart Start classrooms that are part of the pre-K. And then, the other part of Darcy are the 4 kindergarten classrooms that are for Doolittle students currently because there's not enough space in Doolittle. So presumably, if you were doing an overall modernization plan, you'd try to accommodate all your kindergarten students, in Doolittle building, assuming we're keeping that Doolittle building as is. So you would actually reduce the footprint required potentially for your pre-K and birth to 3 program if you were able to do that.
Okay.
So, there's again so many different
Sure.
scenarios that
Yeah.
you have to look at, and that's again part of the charge of the school modernization committee, certainly.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, I have one more point, but I don't know if Vin wants to continue. Or,
If you continue, I'll continue, but it's up to the chair.
Yeah, Adam has a question, but Tim, are you still going? You still have another question?
yeah, I'm not sure if there's a question or a comment. So the one thing that has crossed my mind in the past would be, would it be possible to turn it into, apartments, and specifically in relation to public schools? Generally speaking, I mean, I think being a teacher or a cop is a pretty good job, but they also start out with relatively low wages, and housing could be difficult for them. And just to, if there'd be any way to, um, if it would be possible to even get that as a benefit if it got converted over to apartments. Because I'll say this, I really would like to continue having Humiston. I don't want to see it get knocked down. So need a use for it, and then I wonder if there'd be a value to the schools by providing housing for somebody. I'm sure it would get into contract negotiations and things like that and not be easy, but it was a thought that crossed through my mind because housing is, I think there'd be I think housing stock for say a 23-year-old not making a lot of money, a 25-year-old, I think there'd be an appetite for that in town. So no question, just a comment. Thanks, Andrew.
Great, thanks. Adam?
Thank you. No comment for me right now, except for Rich. The $3 to $5 million figure that Tim had mentioned before, did that include an estimate for abatement or not? Or is abatement unknown right now?
Yeah, that would be an unknown. Those and Vin can correct me. I think the 3 primary were to upgrade ADA compliancy, which I would assume it would include the construction of an elevator to reach all floors. I'm assuming there would be a percentage of abatement required for that, but it's basically just a baseline capital calculation. The other would be the roof, and that would more than likely include abatement. And I can't recollect the third item, Vin.
Windows.
Windows,
Window
yeah,
replacement.
yeah, and there would be marginal abatement, but there would be some abatement involved.
Yeah, and again, those are all budget costs. We've not gone out and hired, a contractor or an architect to give us, more detailed costs. Those are costs that we use for budget purposes, in the capital budget. Obviously, if we're going to proceed down any of those paths, we'd have to, get to the next level with cost estimates.
You
But
would
it
see,
sounds.
yeah,
Oh,
you'd see a more of a significant abatement cost for a full interior renovation. That's where that would really manifest itself.
so really, renovation could potentially be double 3.5 million.
Yeah, I think industry standards is usually 20% is usually what you use. It's a safe bet. You know, it's a safe percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine?
Thanks, Andrew. This is a comment, not a question, and it feels to me like we're going down several roads that are really, as other people have said, being considered by the School Modernization Committee. And, you know, we all know that Darcy has special programs, and we want to make sure that whatever the plan is in the end takes that into account, and that we are not, you know, sort of separating out those aspects of what is, you know, so special about Darcy School, and, you know, splitting it up among buildings. But those are, you know, what happens to the Humiston building if it turns out that the School Modernization Committee has a plan that does not include Humiston as one of the school buildings? You know, that's all going to be then up to the town council, I would assume, whether they want to turn it into apartments or anything else. And I'm just not clear why we right now at this meeting are spending any time on those kind of issues, because of the fact that the School Modernization Committee is working really hard to come up with a global plan that will address, I think, a lot of these issues. So I'm not even sure I understand, other than to get some specifics about the costs associated with keeping Humiston, which again should be going over to the School Modernization Committee. I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish here tonight.
Yeah,
So, and I don't mean to be difficult at all, but it just feels like I don't want to start going down a path or a parallel track that's inconsistent with what the School Modernization Committee is doing, or repetitive, or whatever the right word is. So thanks.
And I totally understand, Catherine. As you and Adam and Tim, and I think myself have all said, there might have been an opportunity to look at other properties in town. And I think that we wanted to get a sense from the board how everyone felt about Humiston, if there was a short-term solution to Humiston, if it's really an issue that needs to be dealt with now, or if it should be rolled into the overall school modernization. So I think that this is all good. We're all talking about it now. And then as we move forward with school modernization, if it does come to the board and there is a request to potentially move central office to an alternate location, we all have the facts in order to address that as a board.
Sure.
The out of school modernization, not that would be part of Board of Education purview, not school modernization.
Right, and I appreciate that. And I don't mean to, as I said, be difficult. But if you want my opinion about Humiston, I mean, I don't see that as being part of what our school system really needs. So, but you're right. We're going in a, we don't need to address that apparently right this second. So I'll be quiet now.
No, you're great. Thanks. All right. Anything else on the discussion for Humiston, or should we move on to solar?
Yeah, I have nothing else. I think, you know, Andrew, I guess my only question is, is the template and the cost analysis for Humiston something that we want to put in front of the School Modernization Committee, just so that they're aware that there was a discussion, you know, with the planning committee and the board about it? And I'm not sure that, you know, there's an outcome that you want to state, like, you know, we can or don't need to do anything at this time.
No,
So
I think that this is definitely something that should go to School Modernization Committee. I think it should be shared with Colliers as they look at all options that are on the table, so they know what direction the board is looking.
okay.
I mean, I'm only one of 7. I don't know if anybody else feels any different here, but
I agree with all of that, Andrew, and just that I think I'm agreeing with what Catherine's saying, that Humiston needs to be a long-term solution and not a knee-jerk solution. So I don't know if, from my point of view, I don't know if short-term is the answer. I think a long-term solution is the answer.
right. I mean, just in the one comment that Vin put on here, I mean, we're looking at about 15,000 square feet in an overall school modernization of all of our school facilities. So it's really a very small portion of the overall plan. So I think we need to look at everything.
All right, so, with that, what I'll do is I'll just go over this one more time. I don't know that it needs to be cleaned up necessarily, and I will send it on to Colliers and I'll send it to Arnett so that we can add it to the next agenda as a discussion item. Sound good?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and then the next item on the agenda is solar. And so the update is actually, it's pretty quick. And I did spell this out in the email, so I'm going a little bit by memory, but we had met with Dave Newman, who's the chief engineer over at ECG, back in February. The goal at that time was to get a proposal, to review our options for various solar configurations across our school buildings, including ground-based solar installations such as solar carports. We'd got a proposal from ECG Engineering, and by the way, ECG Engineering was the firm that served as the owner's rep for our large Amoresco energy performance contract. And they're a good firm, and Dave Newman was part of that original work scope that was done. So long story short, we did get a proposal from ECG to do this work. They appointed Michael Somm, who's actually a local engineer. I believe he operates right out of Southington. So we had the proposal in hand. We provided information. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And, we got an initial review completed by ECG Engineering, which was in PowerPoint. I did share with the planning committee and board members earlier today. But we basically put that project on hold. We haven't expended any money against the agreement with ECG was $90 per hour of time spent with a not to exceed limit of $9,800. So what we've got from ECG at this point is just a baseline of if we were to do solar on our roofs, which I don't think necessarily that is the road that we want to go down. We have a baseline proposal. The next step, which we had put on hold, but we could take off hold if everybody's ready to do that, is to have we could do it by video, a call with Michael Somm from ECG to talk about the work he's done and really start to explain what we're looking to accomplish. So I would think that might be the next step with the planning committee. Then Michael can do site surveys, with Rich and I, and others from our staff. And so the planning committee members could be involved in that review. And then, we would count on ECG to give us recommendations. So, that's really where we are. I think that over the next couple of weeks, things are starting, and I hope I'm not jinxing us, but things seem to be starting to subside in terms of, where we are with the school district and, keeping things running. We're on an even keel right now. I think we're going to have certainly ups and downs, as we have some positive cases, but, we're learning to manage through it. And I think after a couple of weeks, we certainly could invest some time to take this to the next step. So that's really the long and short of the update there. So it's really a question for planning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to have a call, as soon as ECG is ready to discuss. Have we received any invoicing from them to date, Vin, of the 98 not to exceed?
No, nothing.
Okay.
And what they put together was based on, we gave them our roof schedule. We gave them the plans and aerials of our buildings. So what was put together is baseline. My bet is they're not going to charge us for it. Otherwise, they would have. The real work will begin after we do, a site review, with the engineer. So, and ECG's, I'm not going to say they're a generous firm, but I think they'll, conduct this, review at a reasonable rate for us. So they're not going to gouge us in any way.
Great. Okay. Tim?
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I definitely would like to move forward. I think that I have no doubt that there's opportunities for us where this could work well for the school system. We obviously have to decide on locations, specific sites, not just a school, but a parking lot, a roof, a yard. But the one thing that I want to remind everybody, including viewers, is that the price will likely increase over the next 15 months from now. The price is going to increase for solar. It's because there's various incentives. There's both Eversource incentives and federal income tax benefits that we could take in the next 15 months that will be basically disappearing. And so I'd like to take advantage of those things. And when I say we have a 15-month window, that means you want to be energized or literally be plugged in, have it fully constructed, have it plugged in by December 2021. So we would have to make decisions before then, because it'll take probably a couple months to actually make construction happen. So I would like to move forward on this if we're going to. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else on solar? Let's see, let me check the queue. Adam?
Yeah, I just had a comment. I definitely think that a presentation would certainly be interesting, especially with the current state of Eversource's billing practices. It might actually really serve us well if these rates are going to continue. I don't know if we're in a different structure than residential rates. I'm guessing we are, but whatever those extra fees that they've been charging, I'm sure they'll find their way to us eventually. And if we have a way to be able to feed back into the grid at minimal cost and minimal, let's say, minimal obstruction to operations, then it might be at least worth a look.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or anything for Vin before we adjourn to executive session? Hearing and seeing none. Can I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting into executive session?
Motion to adjourn.
Do you have a second? Second by Adam. So that'll conclude our regular meeting. We're going to adjourn to executive session with no action to follow.
All right.
Nice to see everyone. Take care. Have a good night.